What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Hardwood Convos podcast. I'm Brock Bierman alongside Hunter Rose tonight. We are going to recap games 1 and 2 of the NBA Finals, as well as look forward to the rest of the series between the Celtics and Mavericks. Hunter, how are we feeling? I'm not saying that the first two games went as expected, but home court advantage did pay off for the Boston Celtics, and unfortunately for you, your Dallas Mavericks are down 0-2.
Yeah, it's definitely looking like I think the best player so far has been Luca, but the Celtics by far, by far have a better team. Yeah, so it's just been it's tough. It's tough, but
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's shocking how well the Celtics played as a team the first two games, that it's something that, at least personally, and if you feel differently, feel free to jump in, but I don't think we've seen this as much in the NBA recently, especially in this era where you really only need one or two stars on a team to be able to make a run at a title. So having a complete team game is something that I feel like is a lost art in the NBA. And I was talking with Max earlier today, and he said that this might be the most complete team in the NBA since probably the Warriors with KD. But even then, with that team, it was kind of just KD and Curry that were the two leading guys. I mean, that was a complete team, I will say that, but um, the difference between that team and the Celtics team, as you guys can probably hear my dogs barking in the background, but the difference between those two is that Curry and KD were top 5 in the NBA at that time, and there's not one person on this Celtics team that I think confidently you can get from everybody saying that they're in the top 5.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think I would definitely have to think more about the complete team. I think there's an argument for that. Like I could definitely be convinced. I think I would shape it to where it's like I think they overall, like, I don't know, this is probably the same thing as saying that they have a complete team. But I feel like all of their players are complete. It's like I think this might mark the start, and I think we even saw it the past couple years too, but not nearly as much, where it kind of felt like for a very long time in the NBA, it's always been all right. So you have your superstar, but it's like, all right, you need players that fit certain types in order to be successful. Like you need someone who specifically goes out there to be a flamethrower and just start jacking up threes and see if something hits. Another person that's going to lock somebody up on the other floor, but everyone's going to be a liability somewhere. And when I look at the Celtics roster, they're definitely like, yeah, there's some players that are a little bit weaker at like some things. And you're still going to have to, like, as an offensive player or defensive player on the other side, have to think of, all right, how do we exploit said weaknesses for said player? But overall, everyone on our team can do anything. Like if you ask them ultimately, which I don't feel like has been seen really that much for a while. When we think of last year, I think the prime example of that would be somebody like Bruce Brown, whereas like when he was out there, he could do anything. That's what made him so unstoppable. Even Christian Brown to an extent, I think too, could morph into that. But before then, it's just kind of like, all right, you have your defensive players, you have your offensive players, and each of them has a specific role. You went from there. Look at the Celtics team. Anybody can really just about do anything. So
It's kind of crazy, and the team is kind of built towards like you got to choose who you're going to just allow to do whatever. And unfortunately for the Mavericks, the selections on who they wanted to just be like, okay, they're going to be able to do whatever they want, hasn't been the best options. They were giving Porzingis all those 15 footers from the free throw line, and granted, they played great defense on 95% of those jumpers that Porzingis put up from 15 feet. But when he's 7'3" and the guys he's going up against are 6'6", which credits the Celtics on getting those motions on the offense to set him up with those mismatches. It's kind of hard for someone to stop Porzingis when they're almost a foot shorter than him. But if you help off of that, try to double team him, then you got issues where you got people like Derek White in the corner, and Derek White from 3-point range, more specifically in the corner, is a deadly threat. And then you also have the issue of then you might be leaving Tatum or Brown in the corner. If that happens, that can cause a pass out to the corner to one of them, and they drive in, and then they are able to find Drew Holiday on the cut. We saw Drew Holiday down low more than probably any other guard in the NBA this season in the first two matchups against the Mavericks. I was shocked how much they were having him down low as that kind of dump off man in their offense.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think. I mean, saw that a little bit with him on the Bucks, but not nearly as much, especially that last game where it's like he just cut to the basket, and because of how much spacing the Celtics team has, it's like, all right, now it's not a matter of you have the classic, six. You find a mismatch like a 6'10" post player and like a 6'6", person like you just mentioned. Instead, you have a 6'5" just tank of a guard going up against like 6'2" people that are much, much smaller, both in like muscle and just overall weight. And that just killed him. I think I swear there had to have been like 9 in a row where it was just like, all right, down low, and not necessarily even him scoring it. Maybe he scored it. I don't remember. But it was just like he was just there, and then that created something somewhere, whether it was him or like you mentioned somebody else on the perimeter. So
yeah, it was just honestly amazing to see the Celtics and how they were able to perform the first two games. I said this on the 515 Sports Pod earlier today. As a Celtics fan, this is the most confident I've ever felt after the first two games of any playoff series that the Celtics have had with this core group of probably Tatum, Horford, and Brown. The finals against the Warriors, yeah, we snuck out a win game one against them a couple years ago, but they were honestly destroyed that entire game, and Horford just happened to go off in that in between third and fourth quarter area. And if Horford's going to be the guy that leads you to a W, I don't know how many games you're going to win in the finals. But I think the number one thing about this team that's different compared to those other Celtic teams is that Jason Tatum is probably their, I don't know, you can make an argument that Brown is, but Tatum is probably their number one guy, at least on paper. That's who they will probably say. But he doesn't need to put up 30 points a game anymore in any of the series that he's playing in because of the supporting cast. And maybe that might be a reason a lot of people are looking at Tatum right now and saying that this is a disappointing run for him specifically. But the dude hasn't necessarily played absolutely terrible. Maybe the field goal percentage isn't where he wants it to be at. I know he went 1 of 7 in game 2, but he also had 18 points and 11 assists. And I think 18 points, 10 plus assists is a pretty good stat line to have.
Yes. So I agree. I think Tatum has, as a basketball player, played well. As a superstar, has not played as well. And so I think this is something that I have said before about Tatum. I feel like others out there share the sentiment. There are times where I will exaggerate and I will be very open about that and honest about that. I'm willing to say Jason Tatum is a great basketball player. What I don't like seeing, and like you mentioned too, which I think is a very good thing that you brought up, is I think it would be hard to find somebody that would be like, yeah, he's top 5 in the league. Like that is like that's a place where it's like, I don't know if he's there. And I think a lot of times we have an expectation for him, whether fair or unfair, of putting him in those spots when maybe he's not supposed to, maybe not supposed to be is the right word, at the current moment in that spot, right? The other thing that annoyed the heck out of me personally, after game 2, he mentioned the fact that, hey, I don't feel the need to like score the ball as much, things like that. Brother, you shot the ball 22 times. Like, what do you mean you don't feel the need to score? You shot the ball the most in the entire game, man. But yeah, and I think that was just him, probably just in the moment being like, I'm tired of these people.
Yep.
I would agree. I think he doesn't feel the need because his team is so good. I mean, you had Drew Holiday, 11 for 14, as mentioned before, carried the game with the 26 points. You had Jaylen Brown then with that 21. And then in game 1, Jaylen Brown with 22 leading the way, and then Kristaps off the bench, obviously. And so it's like, I agree that he definitely doesn't have to feel the need as much. And he's still able to impact the game, which shows how much of a complete player that he is when he's able to, be a playmaker, be a defensive guy, and be a rebounder even. It's like he can still find ways to impact the game if he doesn't have to, necessarily score every single time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think part of the issue of like how much people expect Jason Tatum to be this unbelievable star that's averaging around 25 plus in the finals is that year that they made the finals against the Warriors, because I think he was third in MVP voting, first team, second team, all defensive player. And there was all these expectations, and then the finals happened, and you could even see it during the run to the finals that slowly Tatum was breaking down because he was the only guy really out there performing at a consistent high level. I think he broke the record for most turnovers in a single playoff run anyways. I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't be shocked if Jaylen Brown was number 2, because those two were turnover machines in that playoff run. The fact that they made the finals just off of how many turnovers that team as a whole committed. But I think that year was an interesting thing because then it pushed him further into the spotlight, because before that year it was, well, maybe he could potentially get there someday. But then that was the year where it's like, oh, it's happening now, or we think it should start happening now just because of that season. And I'm not saying there's any excuses for him not being that level of a success this season, but I also think that the differences between that season and this finals appearance is just completely different. And comparing those two teams is apples and oranges. And I'd honestly go out on a limb saying that this Celtic team would sweep that Celtics team from 2 years ago.
Yeah, I would say that'd be pretty reasonable. Especially when you see the upgrades they've been able to have really across the board. And just with Brown and Tatum in general being upgraded versions of themselves even. But yeah, I'd agree.
But you look at the rest of the team. I mean, Brown's been the most consistent guy this postseason play. Obviously won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Derek White has had some huge games, huge plays. For some reason, he will get 3 threes a game, no matter how many times he shoots. It seems like he's going to get between 4 and 5. And when he's hitting it, though, like when he's like really feeling it versus just like hitting 1 of 6, 1 of 5, that dude is a lethal shooter. But you look over at the Mavericks and Luka, great first half. The problem with the Mavericks, great first half, more specifically game 2, could not miss. That dude, and I think this finals run already, the first 2 games, I've grown to appreciate him even more with how special of a talent he is. Some of those passes that he was just making out of nowhere, because I think Doris Burke made a couple of calls where she was like, there's no way anybody, including him, knows where he's throwing that ball. He just kind of does it, assuming that that player that he's throwing to is going to stay in that same spot. And it sounds crazy, but I think she's kind of right, because you got to just kind of have trust in your players when you're making those passes. I think he had one on the drive where he was double teamed by 2 guys and he just threw it behind one of the defenders on a bounce pass for a 3-point shot. But the bench, more specifically the bench, the starting lineup as well hasn't been completely reliable. The second option that everybody's been talking about, Kyrie Irving, hasn't played nearly as well as maybe what people were expecting. He had 16 points in game 2, but only went 7 of 18 from the field. What are your thoughts on the Mavericks? Is it time to push the panic button for them, or is it one of those things where it's like, you're on the road for the first 2 games against a Celtic team who has been known to have a tough place to play?
Yeah, I think the bigger thing, I don't know if I'd say it's almost like a half press. Game one, first game in the finals, anything could really happen. I think you could make an argument just by how the game went and just how lopsided it was, especially after like the first six minutes was competitive, and then after that it was just kind of like downhill from there. But it's kind of like, whatever. I think game 2, the fact that you're able, you know, you have like you said, you have Luka going off in the first half. Competitive game. I think the fact that nobody else was able to show up and help out like very, very well, at least, would be the number one thing for concern, to be like, all right, like we got, like, there has to be at least one other person that can get 20 points, please. And not, you know, shoot the ball 30 times to do that. If I remember, and as I'm seeing now, the Maverick, outside of Luka, nobody has made more than 2 3-pointers in a game. Everyone has made 1. And I would just like to say I had the bright idea of putting in Tim Hardaway Jr., and he's only seen like 11 minutes so far. That could be someone, I think, regardless of if the Mavericks win or lose, you know, as we think about the future, I'm sure that's something we'll talk about maybe in a future episode, just like different teams. The Mavericks have to, even though I just said we're getting rid of like the player archetype thing, they have to find like consistent shooters somewhere, because
they solved the post
cow,
issue. The shooting is the issue now.
Yeah, it is bad. But yeah, and I think the other thing too is like with Kyrie, man, I brought up again. I've been full of good takes lately. I brought up the fact that Chris Middleton, you know, we need to appreciate him more from that 2021 run. You know, earlier in the playoffs, we had people putting Kyrie Irving above Damian Lillard in talks, right? We need to stop that immediately after these first 2 games. I mean, come on, brother. Just sickening. Like, I don't know if it's the whole, like, if, you know, could just be, you know, have a bad game, you have a bad game. You know, these things happen. I don't know if he needs to be in a better headspace or what, but man, like something got to give specifically for him, because that was the thing that made the Mavericks so deadly, was that 1-2 punch. You have 2 guys that can just score at will, great 3-level scores. And that's just not happening.
He hasn't made a 3 this finals yet. And I think he had 12 in the first game and 18 in the second game. And then the bench has been just kind of disgusting for them. Yeah. Which not to like rain on your parade, but you did say that the Mavericks bench is a little deeper than the Celtics before the finals. But that's the only I have a load of bad takes. That don't worry. By the end of the season, I think one of the things we're going to do is I'm going to go through all the episodes and compile all of our good and bad takes and just listen to them.
That'd be fun.
So we can have Dawson saying that Scoot Henderson is going to win Rookie of the Year as one of the sound bites from that video. But you mentioned Damian Lillard. Did you see the clip from, I don't know what podcast or what radio show? Someone said, and I'm assuming based off of this comment, that this guy is located in the Miami area. He said if Damian Lillard was traded to Miami, Boston would not be in the finals right now. What are your thoughts? And he went into detail. At first I was like, okay, that's dumb. But he went into detail about how Drew Holiday would have still been on the Bucks, which would have been the reason Celtics wouldn't have made the finals, because of how big of an impact he's made for the Celtics. That part of that part of the take, I actually buy, and that makes sense a little bit to me. At the same time, Drew Holiday wasn't really the second best player in the Celtics run to the finals. And at the same time, if he's making this assumption that the Miami Heat would have made a finals run based off of Lillard being there, I don't know how you can make a solid argument on whether, if Damian Lillard was on the Bucks or Miami, if the Boston would have made the finals or not, solely off of the fact that the East was really bad this year and has been bad for the past couple years. So really, usually the team that makes the finals, except for last year, is the best team in the East. So what are your thoughts on that take? And feel free to go in on whatever you want on
that. I'd love to start this off by saying, if there's one thing that Brooklyn Nets fans and Miami Heat fans are really good at, it's living in the past and saying the word if. Because boy howdy, let me tell you. So I'm gonna assume this guy did not, hopefully thought about this. I don't know if he did. If he doesn't remember, Jimmy Butler didn't play in the first series. That's a pretty big deal. I don't know how much changes if Damian Lillard's magically in a Miami Heat jersey, that, butterfly effect. Jimmy Butler's automatically healthy, and everyone on the Celtics teams actually just died. So Miami Heat just move on. But it's like, man, I hate this. I hate Miami Heat fans. But
Okay,
I
but real quick, if he was on the side of the Bucks saying that the Bucks would have made the finals with Drew Holiday, do you still not buy that based off
no.
of their performance?
So this is actually a good thing. I saw this on Twitter earlier today. Shout out Nathan Marzion for saying this. So as you brought up, like Drew Holiday, I will admit, Drew Holiday has played very, very well. Here might be a reason as to why. So if we look at Drew Holiday in his tenure with the Milwaukee Bucks and averages in the playoffs versus the Celtics, here's some things we see. So touches per game compared to when he was in a Bucks jersey to a Celtics jersey, his touches have gone down by 30 touches in a game. So he had 84 touches before, which is pretty high compared to now 56. Taking almost half the amount of dribbles in general, taking way, way, way less dribble jumpers per game. So before he's taking about 8, and now he's taking just under 3. Overall, his total field goal attempts have gone down from about 18 to 10, and therefore his usage has also gone down quite a bit. And so it's like I love Drew Holiday. Like, he's a great guy. Do I wish he was still wearing a Bucks jersey? Yes. Can I say that and still say I really am happy I have Damian Lillard? Yes. Would I still make the Damian Lillard trade for Drew Holiday today? 100 times out of 10, yes, because it's Damian Lillard. But I think if you're on the team now, yeah, hopefully we would still have Chris. And if Giannis were still hurt, I honestly don't know if we still make it that far, if I'm being brutally honest, because while our defense, yes, was definitely a lot worse this past year, I don't think Drew Holiday being thrown in magically solves everything, because the number one thing that has changed with the Milwaukee Bucks, besides Drew Holiday leaving, has been Brook Lopez becoming older and older. And literally, if you are 6 feet tall and you're playing one-on-one versus Brook Lopez, as long as you can run, you have a solid chance of beating the man, because he just can't keep up. And so as I think about, the hypothetical between, like, this Bucks, Heat, and Celtics thing, I just still don't know. Because yeah, sure, the Celtics, I would assume, probably have Marcus Smart. And so they're still going to have a defensive mindset there, maybe not as strong of a defender, and probably not going to put up the same shots. But I mean, they still have everybody else, I would assume. And that's been the number one thing that has kept the Celtics team going and going and going, is the fact that you could probably throw in just about any very, very, like, good basketball player into this team for another player, assuming it's not, Tatum, Brown, Porzingis as like their big 3. And they're probably still going to perform fairly similar, I would say. If anything, depending on who they throw in or take out, they're probably going to have some increased strengths in some ways, and the weaknesses won't be as big of a deal. And yeah, with the Heat, dog, just stop, man. Just stop.
Have you seen the rumors about Jimmy potentially not being there next year?
I have, because Pat Riley's funny.
Do you believe that stuff?
I wouldn't be shocked, personally. Like, do I think Jimmy Butler would want to stay in Miami? Probably. But I mean, if Pat Riley's gonna keep doing his thing over there, it might rub some people off the wrong way and lose some players. We'll see. So,
yeah. You want to talk about rubbing some people the wrong way? I don't know about rubbing the wrong way is the best way to move over to this. I feel like we would be doing a disservice to the NBA if we don't talk about the obvious coaching situation in LA. So last week we didn't really touch on it because NBA Finals was kind of priority, which is crazy that this is kind of taken over as the number one story really in the NBA now while we have a finals matchup. That shows you how dominant the Celtics played the first 2 games though. But of course we're talking about the LA Lakers, and Dan Hurley, who is the head coach of the UConn Huskies, is going to actually end up staying at UConn. made a trip over to LA to meet with them. I think he was offered a very low amount. I think people kept. I didn't see if they released what he was offered or whatever, but they kept comparing it to he should at least get paid what Monty Williams in Detroit's getting paid. So if he got offered lower than that, that's a interesting move by the Lakers to say the least. But either way, I don't think honestly, when I heard the news in the first place, the reason we didn't talk about it last week is because I didn't think it was going to lead to anything. I thought Hurley was always going to be a college guy, more specifically in the East Coast. If he would go to the NBA, it would be an East Coast team. I just think that's the kind of vibe that he gives off. But announced yesterday that he's staying with the Huskies, looking for that three-peat first, would become the first three-peat since John Wooden's UCLA Bruins back in, the Plummer era. But what are your thoughts? I mean, this is the thing about this that makes it really interesting to me is that since Phil Jackson left the second time with the Lakers, since the Kobe era kind of ended, because honestly, when Phil Jackson left, that I feel like the prime Kobe era was also on its way out. They've brought in 6 head coaches since then. Rob Pelinka, though, has been a consistent member of the front office for the Lakers. At what point do we start changing who we're pointing the fingers at for the failure, or the maybe the fact that this job isn't as appealing as it once was? Is it actually on the coaches? Is it on the players, or is it on Pelinka?
I think that's such a tough one because not to call out my Laker friend Chase here, because I think Chase is a very reasonable Laker fan, if I'm being honest. Compared to a lot of Laker fans out there, it changes so often on who is the problem. Like, if you would have asked a Laker fan before the trade deadline of last year who the problem was, they probably would have said Rob Pelinka. And then the trade deadline happened. They're like, oh, I love Rob Pelinka. When they brought in Russ, like before the season started, I love Rob Pelinka. And now we're here. And Russ isn't on the team. They've gone through another head coach change now, and I don't know, man. Like, I think it's so hard too because a lot of their future is kind of gone. And it's hard to say it. You don't. When LeBron James is on your basketball team, even though he is 40 years old, you have LeBron James on your basketball team, you're going to compete, right? Like, you're not going to throw in the towel and be like, all right, unless you seriously trade LeBron James, which maybe is something that they, could think about. I don't think you do.
I can't imagine ever seeing that.
I don't think you do. It's like you have to keep competing. And when you are the Los Angeles Lakers, you're expected to compete because you are basketball. You are professional basketball. And so I think a lot of the problem does fall onto Pelinka just because of the choices that have been made to get to this point, right? Like, if he, regardless of the GM allegations, things like that, it's like he's the man that does have to make the choices, like Pelinka is. And so when you hire Darvin Ham, which shout out Darvin Ham for coming back to the Bucks, baby. Love that guy.
Oh, is he on his way back?
He is an assistant coach for my basketball team again. The vibes are high. And so I think, that's not a huge deal. Anyway, but to bring in him as a first-year head coach, especially getting rid of Vogel, like, after winning, like, sure, it was after a year, but, like, man, like, Frank Vogel was not that bad of a coach, in my humble opinion. And you're just like, all right, this is the guy, And so I think part of the blame does ultimately have to fall on Pelinka, and you have to say, like, do we not necessarily get rid of Pelinka because he's able to pull some very large strings at times to get what this team wants. But it's like, how do we decide, like, do we need to think differently about the choices that are being made? Like, especially now that JJ Redick's probably the front runner once again.
If you're JJ,
I don't know.
If you're JJ, how do you because JJ was the front runner before?
He
How
was,
do you
and then all
how
of a
would you
sudden it was
feel if
Dan
you
Hurley for a solid 48 hours.
how would you feel if you're JJ?
I mean, I'd be a little mad, but at the same,
I'd
I mean,
walk in and I'd be like, huh, my price
yeah.
went up.
Oh yeah, you definitely have to do that. But yeah, uh, but yeah, as with for Dan Hurley though, as someone that doesn't prey on the Lakers' downfall, I was a little upset. You know, I was sad that they weren't able to get a great head coach. As someone who enjoys college basketball, I was very, very happy that he did not leave the UConn Huskies. So
I was talking with Max earlier today about this, and I don't know, he didn't necessarily agree with me, but UConn is with how college basketball is going, where the Big Ten and the SEC are going to overpower, and that the pay for play thing is happening soon. Of course, pay for play is kind of already happening with the collectives, but this is more specifically with the universities getting involved. UConn is in a very, very interesting spot because they're in a conference where a lot of the teams that they're playing don't have football. So a lot of that money isn't going to go towards football. They have a very, 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 very bad football program, but football makes money. So, and they have, whether you want to talk about it or not, a very successful women's basketball program too. That's probably going to want cash as well. So he's going to be in an interesting situation. Now, do I think it's actually going to affect him? No, because he brings off this type of energy that even players, if I was a player, I wouldn't care what I'm getting paid. I have a chance to win a title in college. I'm also there only if I'm getting paid a good amount of money, I'm there for a year.
yeah.
I don't know if you think that it's a risky move for him, and if he fails, honestly, he'll find another job somewhere else.
Yeah.
He's got more. He won 2 titles in 2 years. It took Bill Self almost 12 years to win his second one. That shows you how hard it is. And Bill Self's considered one of the best coaches of all time. That shows you how hard it is to win a national title in college basketball. So he's got a job wherever he wants for the rest of his life, unless something absolutely falls off the tracks.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another point I brought up to Chase before is, you know, like you said, Dan Hurley very, very much gives off a certain kind of vibe.
I don't think he would have worked with LeBron.
No. He would have said something about how bad like they played after a loss, and the whole locker room would have exploded.
That's
Like, how
I
dare
don't know
you
if
call
he
me out?
fits the NBA mold, because
Unfortunately not. Even though he's a great coach.
he's an amazing coach, and like he will get in your face. And I feel like that's perfect for the college game because these athletes haven't necessarily proven themselves as professional yet. However, we'll see how that looks with basically the pay for play making them professional athletes at the college level. But imagine him getting in Anthony Davis's face for like missing like an assignment or something like that on defense for like 3 plays in a row. That would not end well. And especially when the NBA is a players league, you still need to have a decent coach to win a title. I do firmly believe that. But when it's a players driven league, it's a messy situation because if you're not on the good side of your players, you're going to be out quickly.
Yeah. Not wrong there.
Which, I mean, I think Darvin Ham didn't have that locker room from day one. So that was a recipe for disaster. I really don't think that they should have fired Frank Vogel in the first place. That this is this is a team that, like, I don't want to be the fly on the wall during the games. I want to be the fly on the wall like on the day-to-day life thing because like I want to hear the stories and I want to get the vibe of the actual team because there's no way you fire someone that you just won a title with. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what you get when you're in the Lakers. I guess they're kind of the Yankees where it's like they got to be competitive or they're going to make changes right away. And I guess comparing them to the Yankees is probably the best because the Yankees are always in it. Really, they haven't gotten over that hump of getting back to where they want to be. But like, let's be honest. Again, we talked about you can't put an asterisk on any NBA playoff run ever. I mean, you can put one on every NBA playoff run.
Yeah.
The Lakers haven't actually had a good team since probably 2010. See, again, that's degrading the team that won a title. That was a good team. and with the circumstances, they capitalized the situation they were put in.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that they could have won the NBA Finals that year, even if it wasn't in the bubble.
Yeah.
I still think that 2010 Lakers team that won the title would have killed them.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I guess I'm assuming you think JJ is probably going to become the head coach, or
It's looking like it because they're just. I mean, there's some organizations in this league that will keep a lot of things like hush hush. So, for example, thinking about the Bucks, like the whole Damian Lillard and Milwaukee thing, John Horst like sold his soul to keep that from getting out. Like nobody knew that was happening. The LA Lakers do not seem like a team that is one. Maybe this is harsh. Probably don't want to do that because they're Lakers, but two, they probably just can't. Like
it's
that,
LA.
whatever they do, it gets out somehow, some way. And so the fact that I really haven't heard, I mean, there were some other names I know kind of at the beginning of the search, where it's just like, hey, they're talking to these people. JJ has been the only name that's been consistently brought up before Dan Hurley for the last 48 hours.
I wonder if they'll try Sam Cassell. I don't know if, but I feel like he's going to be a head coach somewhere in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a weird situation because it's like that team is, you have arguably the best player of this generation, and depending on who you talk to of all time. But at the same time, he's got 2-3 more years. So you're not only coaching for now, because if you don't coach now for the now and win now, you're going to not make it to the future. But at the same time, you have to prepare for the future. It's that's why I don't think the job is maybe so glamorous as people may think it may be.
No, not at all. I do have an interesting to get us back to our finals matchup. I am curious, Brock, because this is a question that you just brought up, but now I'm interested to hear your thoughts. So assume the finals isn't over. Anyone could win, but it's definitely looking like a certain way. When you compare this Celtics championship roster, 2008.
Oh, this team would win.
You think this team?
Do
you think they would sweep, or do you think what do you think it would end?
Okay, maybe I jumped the gun. I think it would be a very competitive series. I think it would go 7. I truly do believe it would go 7.
Yeah.
It would solely be dependent on the bench and the role players, because you look at that 08 team. Eddie House had some great games against the Lakers. Posey had a decent performance. Poe, I think, I can't remember which game he had a good game. It was either game 1 or game 2 where he was really good for the Celtics that helped get the win. So I actually see a lot of similarities in terms of where the Celtics are at right now versus where they were at in 2008, because they're trying to get over that hump. The difference is that the Celtics, this team, I would say the Celtics were built more for a future versus win now kind of situation. Not that they weren't trying to win now, because obviously they're in the finals. But that Celtics team in 08, it was like, okay, we're going to get you a former MVP. Well, it was either trade Paul Pierce or do what they did, and they ended up doing what they did. Get a former MVP, a guy named Ray Allen, who used to be able to do everything, really. Wasn't he in the dunk contest at one point?
I think so.
And then now what people remember him as is just a 3-point shooter, which, by the way, for people that think that he was only a 3-point shooter, you need to go back and watch his Bucks highlights.
Bucks legend, baby. Bucks legend.
But really, all three of those guys, they were still in their primes, but you also knew that the timeline for their primes were smaller than probably what Tatum, Brown, White, Porzingis. So, like, I guess I'm going in circles with this because I actually like this question. I'm not sure who I would take because it's hard to go against a team that was built like that 08 Celtics team.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the thing with that 08 Celtics team, more specifically that thing with the big four potentially with Rondo, Allen, Pierce, and Garnett, is that I don't know if they all four. I think it's more Pierce. and that's for a different episode. Pierce is one of the most polarizing Celtics players of all times, and I'm someone that like is still I get a little annoyed when he's talking. I'm not gonna lie. But they make it seem like they made like 10 finals, won 5 of them, and they won 1. And so
Yeah.
I would love to see what this matchup would have brought if it was a real matchup, because I think Porzingis could handle Garnett or at least manage him.
Yeah.
And I think Horford would completely get rid of Perkins completely, because Perkins wasn't necessarily a huge asset to that Celtics team.
Yeah.
And then you got the defense of Tatum and Brown, and I feel like those two things on Brown's defense against Irving, there was a couple plays where Irving was trying to isolate in game 2, and Brown wasn't letting him go by, and it was impressive stuff. I would say this would go 7 games if the 08 Celtics played this current Celtics team, and I don't know ask me at the end of this finals run, but I if things are going the way that I think they're going to go, which I can get into where I think this finals matchup is going. I think this Celtics team would beat the 08 Celtics. Yeah. And that's probably me enjoying the present right now than the past, but it's one of those weird situations where it's like I see a lot of similarities. I think this team is a lot less egotistical than that 08 Celtics team. So, and I do believe that sometimes hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. That 08 Celtics team had a lot of talent, worked hard, and the next 2 years, I don't think worked this hard. That's my personal opinion, and that's why they only have one title in that 5-6 year run that they had.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
I think I would agree. I don't know. I would go with today's team as well. I think
because the Celtics in 08 had game 5. I think they had to come back from like a 25-point deficit. Again, if it happens in game 3 or 4, I'm gonna regret saying this, but I don't see this Celtics team getting down that much in the finals. So,
I think I would agree. I think just the way they match up, I think would make more sense for today's Celtics team to win. Honestly, the number one takeaway I'm getting from this is, man, players made no money compared to today back then. Like, these salaries are crazy compared to now. As in crazy low. But that's besides the point. That's a different.
I mean, there's no way that what the Celtics did in 08, that will never be repeated in terms of trades, because contracts will never work out that way.
Nope.
And there's a reason Ray Allen went to Miami. Yeah. And it's because God bless Danny Ainge for what he did with being able to get Brown and Tatum. By the way, could potentially, depending on how this finals go in the future years, could potentially become one of the best trades in NBA history with moving Garnett and Pierce and Terry to Brooklyn. But he bet on the wrong guy. I'm sorry. Rondo's great, but he bet on the wrong guy. Not that they would have won the finals that year, but Allen leaving the Celtics was the first block. It was kind of like the Marcus Smart getting traded this year. I was like, uh-oh, here we go again. We're going to start moving people, and then I'm going to have to deal with Avery Bradley and Jay Crowder 2.0 seasons.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think I would go with this team overall over the Fast Celtics team, just because of the matchups, and I think even just what I kind of mentioned earlier, what each player is able to bring to the table can be very diversified. And with this 08 team, it's kind of cookie cutter and what to expect from everybody ultimately. So
really looking at the last couple finals, you got the Nuggets, last couple of NBA champions, Nuggets, Warriors. Was it Bucks then?
Bucks, yeah.
Before that was
Lakers,
Raptors, and then we get to the Warriors, Cavs, Warriors situation. and you can call me a complete idiot. I don't know how many of those teams would match up well against this Celtics team. I think the Bucks did. I think the Bucks would actually match up really well because of how well they were playing that run to the finals.
Yeah.
I remember when they got to the finals, everybody and their mom was talking about how unbelievable the Suns are going to be for the next 10 years, but nobody was going to bring up the fact that, on the opposite side is a MVP and a 3 guy that no one talks about and is arguably one of the most underappreciated players in the NBA. I know that you love him. I know you have a shirt that just says Chris Middleton is good. But I think this Celtics team could have hung around or even beaten the Nuggets last year. I feel like they would have beaten that Warriors team. Like I said, that this Celtics team would sweep that Celtics team from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Raptors. And then you get to the Warriors teams, and it depends on which Warriors team that you're talking about. But that's just how good team-wise I feel like the Celtics team is on paper.
Yeah. I think I'd have to look at it more too. But I think last year's Nuggets team is good. I'm a Nuggets hater, so I think I would still take the Celtics.
We've talked about role players. The Nuggets got rid of Jeff Green and Bruce Brown.
Yep.
And who could they probably have used at some point in this postseason run? At least one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think similarly, the one thing I think is hard, I think they would beat that Warriors team. I think especially having Drew helps out.
Yes,
Curry was just cooking. And to be able to have Drew for that would help out tremendously.
Yeah, and that Marcus Smart is an amazing defender. I do believe that he did get sometimes awards are given out through campaigns, not necessarily complete stats or whether or not he was 100% deserving. If there would to be a guard that would win an award, it would either be him or Drew Holiday when it comes to consistency on defense. So it was one of those things I feel like that the Celtics did put together a good campaign to make an argument for it, and it resulted. If he was on the Grizzlies and he did that, nobody would bat an eye because the team actually does matter when it comes to that situation, unfortunately. But yeah, Drew Holiday, what is a different, it's hard to compare those two because Smart is more of a verbal defender.
Kind of a pest.
Yes. And Drew Holiday just kind of, he's like, this is my job. I get paid to do this.
Yeah. I know that was I don't remember who it was. If it was it might have been PG on his podcast. They were talking about Drew Holiday. And he's like, I'm scared of that guy because he likes to play defense. He wants to be on. He doesn't want to be on offense.
That's the guy you want on your team. That's the guy you want on your team. He can't. I know there. I sent a text to one of my buddies, and I said, Drew Holiday has a chance to do the funniest thing and win a Finals MVP.
He does.
And right now, I guess before I get into that, who do you think is the favorite? Who would you pick right now if the series ended tomorrow?
I would probably pick not Tatum. Brown.
Oh, I was gonna say,
whoa. No, I'd probably pick Brown. I think there's definitely an argument for Drew. If Drew won, I would be happy for him. I would delete Twitter. Just as our conversation earlier about the whole if and how, Buck should have kept Holiday. I would not be able to stand any form of social media or ESPN.
I get that.
But I think like I said, he's played amazing. He definitely has an argument to why he should win it. But I would
can you give it to a GM? Just give it to Brad Stevens.
Yeah, honestly. The first ever rather than MVP, they just give a all-team award.
I mean, I was looking it up because I wanted to know Finals MVP players with the least amount of points scored or whatever. Because I was like, is there a way just because he averages a double-double that they can find? I feel like Tatum, if he puts up 30 once and he averages a double-double the rest of the way, they'll find a way to give it to him.
I mean, he's almost averaging a triple-double too. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing that I'm like. He's a great player. Like I think there's still an argument for him.
I was looking and like Iguodala averaged. Andre is the weirdest Finals MVP ever. We can get into a completely different conversation about that. 16.3 points per game. And then you see a bunch of people from the 80s and 70s, which again, different era of basketball. And then you find Kawhi Leonard in 2014, where he averaged 17.8, but he was doing so much outside of scoring that was affecting that Heat run that resulted in him getting the Finals MVP, one of his first of his 2 Finals MVPs.
He has a certain clip that's pretty famous involving a certain word said by LeBron James seeing Kawhi Leonard check in, which probably won him an award on the spot.
Yep. But it's what, like, if Tatum tomorrow, if he puts up 30 plus, 35 plus, 8 boards, 4 assists, that will lock up the Finals MVP, because I feel like the NBA will want to give it to him. I'm not saying that the NBA would do that, because isn't the fans vote on it, right?
I think so. I think there is a part of it that the fans vote on.
I was going to say, how much do you believe in that they actually put that into account?
Probably not a whole lot, to be honest.
Because like, if I was if I was like 13 and I had social media, I'd be like Luke Cornett.
So it looks like the Finals MVP is determined by 11 media members, which is the mid of the series. So depending on who the media members is, then
then that's a good. There's a good situation that Tatum won't get it then, because the media hates him right now.
Yeah,
it's all about how he hasn't performed.
Yeah,
so
unless they ask Doris Burke, then she'll.
Hey, I had to go through a Finals appearance with the Warriors where all she was doing was glazing Steph Curry. Everything Curry did. Yeah. Oh my gosh, look at Curry.
He's really good at that.
So it's about time that the Celtics are getting praise from her, because there's just certain playoff series where she's calling games, and it seems like she's always like Joel Embiid, Giannis, all these different things. And granted, most of those series, Tatum, Brown, all those guys weren't X factors, so they were warranted. But it's fine. It's finally happening where the Celtics are getting praise from her. But yeah, I guess one of the things I'm shocked that we didn't mention this, that Luka didn't have 10 assists in the first game. He didn't even have 2 assists. He had 1 assist. Not something I had on my Finals bingo card.
No.
If I'm the Celtics, let him score.
Mm-hmm.
Stop everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, they finished with 9 total assists that first game. That's oof.
They need to put Tim Hardaway Jr. in more.
If he's able to cook, because I think that's the other thing too, that the Celtics have done very, very well. Obviously, the Celtics great defensive team, right? Great 3-point defending team, just overall, which has been. I mean, when we're in a league now that most teams live and die by the 3, where it's like that's where
they're shooting around 24. Dallas is shooting around 24%.
Yeah, like when you're able to kill a team that bad from just even one extra point from a make, it hurts. It can hurt a team a lot, and so they've been doing a really good job of that.
Yeah, I guess we can preview the next couple games. But anything else revolving around this matchup from the first 2 games that you want to talk about?
Not much. I don't think there's too much more.
Games 3 and 4 in Dallas. Game 3 is tomorrow on Wednesday, and Game 4 on Friday. Do you have Dallas tying it back up? Do you have Dallas taking one of these? Where do you see Dallas going? Or is it over? Are we watching the last 2 games of the NBA season?
I think there is a world where it's over. I think Dallas can get at least 1. I think that's possible. Not that I don't think that you can just be like, all right, games are trending this way, so we are for sure going to see like this in Game 3. You can do that for sports betting if you want. That's a pretty smart way to do that. But when you're actually trying to like say who's going to win or who's going to lose, it's hard to do that. I do think though that it does at least speak a little bit that Dallas was able to make it more competitive. But like I said before, it's like as if they can get one other person to step up and actually be a threat and not just a guy Luka can dump the ball off to when he's double teamed and then they get a bucket that way. I think that then they can get a game for sure. I think it'd be really, really hard for them to win 2 in a row though. I like just the way that this Celtics team is constructed. Because I think that's something too that's been really, really well done. Porzingis has only played what, like 20, 23 minutes, like in each game.
And he's going to be probably limited tomorrow.
And so obviously when you have, 50-year-old Al Horford in the 30s for his minutes, that's probably not going to be able to keep up. Granted, they have more time between games in the finals, but I think they've done a good job of being able to put Porzingis on that restriction for minutes. So that way, if they do need him more, he's been able to, not destroy his body so far. And he's still able to like recover. And
sounds like he's going to play game 3. We'll see.
Yeah. I would assume so.
Definitely limited time, I'm assuming. But so are you going with Dallas winning at least one of them?
I think so. I think I'll say Dallas wins one.
Are you more on the side of it's probably going to be a gentleman's sweep, or do you think it's probably they're going to come into game 3 guns blazing?
I mean, I would love to stick with my prediction and say the Mavericks will win 4 in a row. But if I'm thinking realistically here,
hey, Jaylen Brown can win 5 championships before he turns 27 or whatever he's going to be.
He's got a year, and he might get one now, so he's only got to get 4 more. Yeah, I would assume probably if I were to change or put money on anything now, I would probably say gentleman's sweep, just because of the way this team has been clicking. I think there'd have to be a lot of changes.
I'm confident in the Celtics team. Again, like I said, the most confident I've ever been watching Celtics play with this core group of Horford, Brown, and Tatum. But I don't see them sweeping. I don't. Mm-hmm. I said Celtics in 7. I'm not saying that's going 7, but I see the Mavericks getting at least one game. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's going to be game 3 or game 4. It's one of those things where it's like everybody's kind of mentioning that the Celtics got over their woes of losing at home, losing game 2s, that maybe for some reason they'll have like not a hangover game, but like a game where like game 3 doesn't go anywhere near the way that they want it to. Mm-hmm. And so they drop game 3 and then they have a bounce back game 4. But who knows? It's going to determine whether or not I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens. I don't think it's going to be a sweep. If it's a sweep, fine by me. I'm not going to complain whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It will put a cap to potentially one of the better teams, better seasons that the NBA has seen in a while. When's the last time we've had a final sweep?
Oh, I don't know. Would it have been? Then did the Warriors? Didn't they sweep the Cavs in 2018?
That sounds right.
Because game 1 was the close game with the iconic J.R. Smith moment, and then after that it was a pretty boring final.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. 2018, yep.
Which, by the way, overall, that 2018 playoffs, really, really, really good playoffs up until game 2 of the finals. Very entertaining. But yeah. And that's besides the point. But I think that's the last time there's been a sweep.
2018, man, that feels like forever ago.
It does.
Jason Tatum baptizing LeBron in game 7, and then LeBron doing what LeBron does to the Celtics and just okay. I say this is the most confident I've ever been in the Celtics. When that dunk happened, I was ready to be like, oh, this is like the basketball gods being like, they're passing the torch. LeBron is never going back to the finals, and it's over. It's over. And then he, now has a title since 2018. But before 2018, the last time a team has been swept, it's kind of funny that we're mentioning LeBron. 2007 San Antonio Spurs versus Cleveland Cavaliers was another sweep.
Yeah.
And then Los Angeles Lakers versus the New Jersey Nets in 2002. So there's been sweeps. Boston has only swept once in the finals, but it's a year that's not even worth mentioning, if that makes sense, of what year that was probably around. I don't even know if my grandparents were in high school yet to give you an idea. But anyways, the Celtics, if they get the sweep, I'm telling you, it will make me feel different about the future with this team.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, I know that the East is it's going to be a rebuild year for the East. I think there's going to be a lot of East teams that make a lot of moves, and it could potentially become a very difficult conference. I saw a hypothetical, what if LeBron goes to Philly because Philly has room for another max contract? Yeah. And I swear, I don't think it's going to happen. I think you and I, and pretty much 90%, 99% of the fans that don't have like actual connections to the NBA probably think he's going to be back in LA. But if the small chance of him going back to the Eastern Conference, which, I mean, why not go back to the Eastern Conference when it's kind of an easier trip to the finals? Yeah. But I swear, if he goes back, I won't. And especially on Philly.
I mean, if my 2K franchise has anything to say about what will happen, the Mavericks can still win the finals, and LeBron James will be on the Utah Jazz next season. So be ready, world.
What?
That's the last place I would bet for him to go, just so everyone knows. But yeah, I would be shocked if you were on the 76ers.
Last place I'd ever see him going is Orlando, because he said he'd retire before he played in Orlando ever again.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Forgot about that.
Which I think would be hilarious if like the Lakers like next year just have like a terrible season and they're like, okay, what if we just give everybody for Paulo and just like, and then sign a bunch of G League guys? So then LeBron's in Orlando, but I don't think that would ever happen. We'll see when we're back for a next episode. Game 5. Do you know when Game 5 is?
Game 5 would be on what would it be?
Is it a Monday?
Yeah. Yep, it'd be Monday.
Okay, so maybe we hop on Sunday, maybe do a podcast or something to recap game 3 and 4. Or if it's over, we'll wait and do a season recap, put a bow on the season, and potentially look to what the offseason is going to bring. Because I think, aren't we like 4 weeks away from the NBA draft?
Yeah, it's getting real close. Yeah, I think if I were to this has been a season. If there's something that I've been doing in the background in my own personal life, I've been doing a lot of looks into the offseason. And let me tell you, y'all, this is not going to be an exciting offseason whatsoever. But hey, although the big names might not be there, there are going to be a handful of at least rotational pieces that will be on different teams.
And that's important. That's important to winning a title.
Yep.
So, are you a big mock draft guy? Have you been looking at the draft? Or
a little bit?
I don't know much about half of these teams.
It's a pretty atrocious draft class, as most people have said. I believe there is an unnamed GM out there that said they would not trade. I don't even remember who it was. It was some role player, though. And they're like, I wouldn't even trade us 2 second-round picks for him, which says something because NBA GMs love their NBA picks the last 3 years. So it's a pretty weak class, but I think that doesn't do it justice because, hey, as we just said, role players are important. And this class features a lot of players that can have the possibility to do a lot of things, not necessarily exceptional, but fairly well to be rotational pieces in the next 3-4 years. So
Anthony Bennett's hoping that Bronny James gets drafted number 1 overall.
That'd be crazy. That would be nuts.
But yeah, we'll be back whether it's Sunday to recap games 3 or 4 or Monday, Tuesday of next week to recap the whole season. We'll find a time, let you guys know. For those that know people that watch us or stream us on Facebook, Facebook has since blocked us from streaming just because we don't have 100 followers. So if you have Facebook, please tell or people that have Facebook, tell them to follow us. We have 70 followers, so all we need is 30
Almost
more
there,
to
baby.
be.
Come on.
It's
Let's
all
make the
we
push,
need.
boys. Let's make the push. Come on. Let's
We
make it
just need 30
happen.
more, and I know that's where a lot of our streamers and viewers come from. So we greatly appreciate it. But yeah, both Hunter and I have the Mavericks winning at least one of the next 2 games. So we assume we're going to be back here on Sunday to talk about those 2 games. But who knows? Maybe Jason Tatum shuts everybody up and puts up 40 in the last 2 games.
That'd be something.
But until then, thank you everybody for tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow on anywhere that you have social media for the 515 Podcast Network. But for Hunter Rose, I'm Brock Bierman. We are signing off. We will see you maybe Sunday, maybe next week.
Yeah.